Is Christianity all bad? I've described in several videos on this channel the process by which I came to the conclusion that there is no God. Or, if there is, that he, she, or it is not particularly relevant, certainly not relevant to my life. I'm not among those, though, who were deeply damaged by their Christian upbringing. I didn't have a Christian upbringing. I came to Christianity later in life and left it again some years later. I have no traumatic experience to report. Nor did I leave because I was disturbed by the hypocrisy within the church or the dubious morality of many of its participants and institutions. As a cynic, I pretty much expect a number, even a large number, of bad eggs within any human organisation. It's understandable that people should hold the churches to a higher standard, of course, given what the church claims and what it teaches. Perhaps one of the most profound criticisms of the church, at least, if not of the Christian faith itself, is that it doesn't work. It doesn't transform people. Of course, there are many people who will provide their testimony of how their faith transformed them. It's not for me to question the validity of that transformation. I do question the source of that transformation, however. Many people are transformed by their experiences in the world, and not all of those could be traced to any kind of religious conversion. And many people are not transformed. I think of someone like St. Paul. Before his conversion, Saul was a Jewish fanatic who persecuted Christians. He was an arsehole. When he became Paul, he became a Christian fanatic, and still an arsehole. I think this is true of many people. For all the criticisms that can be justifiably aimed at the church and at Christianity, I don't think it can be reasonably denied that these have both at times been agents for good in the world. I think to deny this is a kind of blind anti-Christian fundamentalism. Without myself denying the terrible crimes against humanity that individuals within the church and also institutions of the church have committed throughout history, it can't be denied either that they have also performed good works, acts of charity. Charity has played a big part in the history of the church and its relationship with broader society. Hospitals and other charitable institutions, for example. I won't deny that there are sometimes mixed motives behind these charitable acts, covert evangelism being one of these, one of the most obvious. Perhaps also maintaining control over people, having power over people may play a role here too. I won't deny either that even these charitable institutions have at times been instruments for evil in the world, orphanages and schools, to just give a couple of examples. These acts are all the more egregious for that, and I fully understand the outrage. It's entirely justified. I won't deny, however, that there have been people and institutions within the church who've been genuinely good and caring people, and who have performed genuinely good works. These people have taken seriously that strand of Jesus' teaching which emphasizes loving and caring for people, loving your neighbour, loving even your enemy. The fact that this is intermingled with other ideas which are less helpful doesn't invalidate them. These are good ideas, and sometimes they've borne fruit in the world. Certainly the Christian community has been more inclined towards charitable and humanitarian acts than many other religious movements throughout history. But people remain people, and institutions remain institutions. Individuals are fallible. None of us are actually saints, even the best of us. And every human institution inevitably becomes corrupt. It becomes more concerned with itself over time than with its initial purpose. Ecclesia semper reformanda est. The church must always be reformed, as must every institution. There are two fundamental criticisms that I will offer up against the church, one of which I've hinted at already. I think any human organisation that begins with noble intentions, with some kind of humanitarian agenda, will ultimately lose sight of its initial goal. More often than not, it will become corrupt over time. If not corrupt in legal and moral terms, then at least corrupt in the sense that it's lost this initial vision that the institution itself consumes more and more of the energy and focus, that people within the institution become concerned about their own power and prestige. If the church is genuinely upheld by the grace of God in some way, we might reasonably expect to see some actual empirical difference between the church's institutions and other institutions. I don't think we do. Of course, Christians will likely argue that this is because of human sin. But Jesus' sacrifice was supposed to be the remedy for this. Christians are supposed to be born again, cleansed of original sin, etc., etc. Shouldn't this actually make some kind of observable difference in the world? I see no evidence for this. There is in fact no evidence at all that the world is saved in any meaningful sense of that word. Well, Christians may then often turn and point to the apocalyptic stream of Christianity, Revelation and all that, all the destruction of the world and the judgment of the world and all that stuff. I would suggest, however, that this is fundamentally in conflict with Jesus' apparent message about love and forgiveness. If you want to point to elements within Jesus' own teaching which are also of this apocalyptic nature, I would simply suggest that the conflict runs through Jesus' teaching too. It's great that so many people have chosen to focus on the love aspects. It's unfortunate that the apocalyptic element persists alongside and in conflict with this. My second criticism is that, for the most part of its history, the church and Christian teaching has focused on individual charitable acts rather than societal change. It's treated the symptoms rather than the causes. It's largely supported unjust structures in the world, structures that uphold poverty, inequality, and injustice. I suspect that this is partly because of a certain otherworldly focus, and one which is concerned with the individual soul and salvation. The world, after all, is ultimately doomed, so the focus has been on caring for, in a physical sense, and saving, in a spiritual sense, individuals, often saving them from the world. The church has at times embraced more progressive political issues and movements, anti-slavery, for instance, environmental concerns, even feminist issues to some extent. But I don't think it can be argued that the impetus for these societal and institutional changes has arisen from within the Christian faith itself. These movements usually arise within more humanitarian groups and are only subsequently recognised as valid and adopted, to some extent anyway, by the church, sometimes co-opted by the church. Even then, I think they're often hampered by the Bible and the Christian tradition. This is even true of the liberation theology that I once embraced. This radical political theology didn't arise spontaneously from within the Christian tradition, although it could later appropriate certain elements of this tradition in support of its novel interpretation of the gospel. But the impetus came rather from Marxism and other secular politico-philosophical movements. And it was hampered by such biblical sentiments as render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. Other sayings such as blessed are the poor, or the poor will always be with you, as well as this overall emphasis on the salvation of the individual and the life of the world to come. I'm not anti-everything Christian. I'm not anti-everything church. I've not personally suffered harm from the church. I wasn't scarred as a child by fear of hell and fear of God, though I do have enormous sympathy for those who were. I don't even regret my time in the church. I particularly loved all the philosophical thinking and critical thinking to which it exposed me. This will sound very odd to many people who are still within the church or even those who've left the church. But the church actually enabled a great intellectual awakening in me. Now, I always had that tendency, so it didn't fundamentally change me, but it provided time, opportunity, and the tools and a disciplined framework in which I could develop that side of myself. deep exploration of the Bible, history, philosophy, ethics, theology. This enabled me ultimately to make an informed, educated decision about whether or not the Christian faith was for me. I decided that it wasn't.